My family and I, we moved to Indonesia in June 2010 to be a part of our church plant team here in Jakarta.
The transition was hard. I was 4.5 months pregnant with Evie when we first came to Indonesia, and I remember I still had morning sickness. I hated the food. I hated the mosquitoes. I really disliked the hot, humid weather. But over time, all of those things changed. I love Indonesian food. I crave it often. Mosquitoes don't really bother me anymore. And now I'm used to being hot and sweaty all the time.
It was very emotional to leave our family, our extended family, parents, siblings. But at the same time, it was something that was so exciting for us to move to a new place and to begin a new life and to begin a new church. Well, there's obvious similarities and differences in our churches here compared to the U.S. I mean, obviously, we want to keep the same spiritual DNA, those values, those things that we just hold very true to our hearts as a church. But there's also some big differences. The biggest difference was we were starting from scratch, which was actually pretty fun because we got to try new things, and there were a lot of busts, and there was a lot of things that went well that were different than our previous experiences. Our lives are pretty ordinary here, except the chaos that's involved with trying to raise 3 young kids. But for me, my day, usually I try to start very early to spend time in prayer, to spend time in the Word. Besides that, from like 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., anything can happen. I try to spend as much time as I can working from home so that I can help out my wife, I can see my kids. As well, I have meetings with different church members, times to counsel them and disciple them, as well as for just meetings for church.
My most important ministry is raising my kids, and I try my best to teach them about God's unconditional love for them in the way that I discipline them, the way that I care for them, the way that I mediate fights between them.
We've seen here many families and many people in our church come from broken families. And so to see a model of a family that's not perfect, but trying to follow God, trying to serve God with our lives, and trying to raise our children to know and love Jesus is something that's a valuable ministry to people. Overall, I've learned a few things about God and about ministry and myself. The first is I've just learned that God is always with me and He's always at work. Really, I see the power of the gospel and the power of God at work in people, to save people, to change people, to convict people of sin. And that's an amazing thing for me to grasp. The second thing, quite simply, God loves His church. In fact, this church that we've started here is not ours, it's God's. And He's entrusted me to take care of His people. And it's an incredible privilege and joy to do that.
God has taught me that He is my provider. One of the most obvious ways is the fact that He really showed Himself so faithful through Evie, and just how healthy she is now without any problems despite her dextrocardia. Something more recently is that He provided us a house to live in, and time was ticking, and it was getting closer to the time we were going to go back to the United States, and we needed to find a house as soon as possible. And as time was getting closer, I was getting a little bit nervous, but He pulled through, and He blessed us with this house and with a great landlord.
For the next steps in ministry, my big prayer, bold, inspired, God-sized prayer, is discipling young men and women to be godly men and godly women and valuable, trained-up kingdom workers. We want to really release people to do missional initiatives in Jakarta. There's so many needs in our city here with over 10 million people, and so many social issues and political issues and cultural issues just in our city, and just to raise up people who will be difference makers in our city.
I'm really excited for this next season of ministry. I'm excited for how God's going to work in our church and in the lives of our members. Really looking forward to how He's going to take relationships deeper with the people that we've already met, as well as the people that I haven't met yet and that God's going to bring into our lives.
I really consider ourselves just starting and still in the beginning stages of our church, and the road's going to be tricky. We're just going to keep depending on God. We're going to keep believing in the power of the gospel to save people, and just keep on trying to glorify Christ in all that we do while God has us here.